Hello West Coast, and buckle up because tonight we've got what might be the biggest weather story of the summer so far. A monsoon surge is barreling into the state right now. And over the next 72 hours, we could see everything from flash flooding in the deserts to thunderstorms rolling all the way to the California coastline. Yes, even the Bay Area. At the same time, we're still cooking under triple-digit heat in the Central Valley, and Death Valley is flirting with 125 degrees. This is a genuinely dynamic setup, the kind we don't see very often in the middle of August. And I'm going to walk you through every piece of it tonight. But before we get into the maps and the numbers, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from and what it's actually doing outside your window at this exact moment. Are you baking in the valley? Did you just hear thunder rumble over the mountains? Are you already feeling that muggy monsoon humidity creeping in? Type it in the comments. I read these live, and I'll be shouting out some of your reports later in the show. All right, let's get into it. Let's start with the setup, because understanding times this is happening, makes the next few days a lot easier to follow. Right now, we've got a plume of subtropical moisture pushing up out of the southeast, essentially riding in from the direction of the Gulf of California and northwestern Mexico and wrapping into California on southerly and southeasterly flow aloft. This is your classic southwest monsoon pattern, and it's arriving at a moment when the atmosphere is primed to do something with it. Meteorologist Dennis Mattinson, who tracks the Eastern Sierra and Owens Valley region, summed up the pattern shift happening as we speak. Our long stretch of significant heat is starting to wane. And as we move through this week, we're going to see a more persistent monsoon pattern take hold. That's because the ridge of high pressure that's been parked over the southwest is becoming more centered over the Four Corners region, while a separate area of low pressure continues to deepen along the west coast. That combination, ridge to the east, trough digging in along the coast, is exactly the recipe that opens the door for a more favorable moisture tap streaming into California's mountains and deserts. In plain English, the heat dome that's been baking the state is shifting east. And in its place, we're getting a wetter, more unstable atmosphere, capable of firing off thunderstorms almost daily. The Sierra Nevada, the Southern California mountain ranges, think the San Bernardinos, the San Gabriels, the San Jacintos, and the deserts nearby are the first areas in the crosshairs. As we go through the next 3 days, thunderstorm coverage is expected to increase, not decrease. San Diego's mountains and foothills, San Bernardino, Riverside, the entire Sierra Nevada chain, and possibly even stretching out toward the Las Vegas region could all see heavy downpours, frequent lightning, and localized flooding. And then as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, an approaching upper level low, essentially a pocket of cooler air spinning in the atmosphere above us, could expand that storm activity even further west. We're talking about the possibility of showers or thunderstorms reaching coastal California and potentially even working their way into the Bay Area. That's notable because coastal California and the Bay Area typically don't see much in the way of summer. Thunderstorms, the marine layer, and cooler ocean-influenced air usually keep that monsoon moisture bottled up over the deserts and mountains. So if this trough does what the model suggests, it would be a real departure from typical August weather along the coast. Now let's talk about the two biggest hazards this pattern brings: lightning and flash flooding, because these are the parts of the forecast that actually put people at risk. These storms have the potential to be prolific lightning producers. When you get monsoonal thunderstorms building over mountainous and desert terrain in August, you're dealing with cells that can pulse up quickly, produce dozens of lightning strikes in a short window, and then move on to redevelop somewhere else. If you're out hiking in the Sierra, camping in the desert, or working outdoors anywhere near these ranges over the next few days, lightning safety needs to be front of mind. The general rule always applies here. If you can hear thunder, you're close enough to be struck, get to shelter immediately, avoid open ridgelines and exposed peaks, and stay off the water. The second hazard is flash flooding, and this one deserves just as much attention. Some of the stronger cells embedded in this monsoon flow are capable of producing intense rainfall rates. And when that rain falls over, steep. Dry terrain, especially areas that have been baked all summer or sit downstream of recent burn scars, the ground simply can't absorb it fast enough. That's when you get flash flooding, sometimes with very little warning. Desert washes that look bone dry one moment can become raging channels of water within minutes if a storm cell parks itself over the wrong drainage upstream. If you're traveling through desert regions, Death Valley, the Mojave, the areas around San Bernardino and Riverside counties, please do not drive across a flooded roadway or a wash that's running with water. It takes surprisingly little moving water to sweep a vehicle away. And it happens in California's deserts every single monsoon season. Mountainous terrain carries a similar risk, just with steeper, faster moving runoff. If you're in a canyon or a narrow drainage in the Sierra or the Southern California ranges and you see building thunderstorm clouds upstream, that's your cue to move to higher ground, even if it's not raining where you're standing yet. Let's not forget, California is still running very hot right now, and this monsoon moisture is arriving on top of some genuinely extreme temperatures. On Sunday, Bakersfield hit around 108 degrees. Death Valley, no surprise here, pushed to nearly 125 degrees, which is squarely in the range where that basin becomes one of the hottest places on the entire planet on any given day. Sacramento, Fresno, Modesto, and the Redding and Red Bluff area up in the northern Sacramento Valley all reached or exceeded the 100-degree mark as well. And it's not just the Central Valley. Out in the eastern Sierra, today's numbers tell the same story. Bishop hit 99 with an overnight low of 60. Big Pine also reached 99. Independence topped out at 100 with a low of 69. Lone Pine hit 99. And Olancha, often one of the hottest spots in the Owens Valley, reached 102. Death Valley itself, according to today's local readings, hit 123 with an overnight low of 96, which tells you just how little relief that basin is getting even after sunset. Meanwhile, up at elevation, Mammoth Lake stayed comparatively comfortable with a high of just 78 and a low of 58, a reminder of just how much elevation matters when it comes to summer heat in California. So here's the pattern to understand. The heat isn't gone, but it is being undercut. As the monsoon moisture increases and that upper level low approaches, we're going to see a gradual cooling trend from Monday through Wednesday, and then a more noticeable cooling trend as we move into next week. As the overall flow shifts toward a more southwesterly onshore pattern, meaning air coming off the ocean rather than baking over the desert. Bakersfield is a great example of just how much of a swing we're talking about. That city could fall from around 108 degrees down into the lower 90s within just a few days. And out in the eastern Sierra, Bishop is forecast to drop all the way down to a daytime high of only 89 degrees by Thursday. A dramatic change from the upper 90s we're seeing today. That's nearly a 10 to 15 degree drop in a matter of days, which is a significant shift by any standard, especially in the middle of August. So if you've been suffering through this heat wave, some relief genuinely is on the way. It's just going to arrive alongside a more unsettled, stormy pattern rather than a simple return to calm, dry conditions. Let's touch on smoke, because this is always a summer concern in California, and the story right now is actually a relatively good one, at least by comparison. California's smoke situation is relatively limited right now compared to what's happening up in the Pacific Northwest, where wildfire activity has been more significant this season. That said, it's not entirely clear here. Some haze is possible, particularly up in the far northeastern corner of the state, around Modoc and Lassen counties, where smoke drifting down from fires burning in Oregon can filter in and reduce visibility or add a milky look to the sky. If you're in that region and you notice hazier skies or a smoky smell over the next few days, that's almost certainly the source. Beyond that corner of the state, though, air quality tied to wildfire smoke isn't the dominant story this week. The bigger near-term concerns remain the heat and the monsoon storm risk we've already covered. Now, let's shift to the coast, because there's something happening in the water that beachgoers and anyone living in low-lying coastal areas should know about. A southern hemisphere swell is expected to stay active over the next couple of weeks. These swells originate from storm systems way down in the Southern Ocean, near places like New Zealand and the southern tip of South America. And the energy travels thousands of miles across the Pacific before arriving on California's shores as long-period waves. For surfers, that often means bigger, more organized swell. But it also comes with some real hazards for everybody else. Stronger rip currents, more powerful shore break, and higher surf that can catch swimmers and waders off guard even on days that otherwise look calm and sunny. There's also a coastal flooding angle to this. Around the times of high tide, this swell could contribute to minor coastal seawater flooding in low-lying areas. Think beachfront roads, parking areas right along the shoreline, and low-elevation neighborhoods near harbors and estuaries. It's not expected to be a major flooding event, but if you live or work in one of these vulnerable coastal spots, it's worth keeping an eye on the tide charts over the next couple of weeks, especially when high tide lines up with the peak of the swell. Let's zoom out now, because there's a longer range story developing that's worth flagging, even though it won't affect your weekend plans. We are watching a developing El Niño pattern, with unusually warm waters building along the equatorial Pacific. Historically, El Niño patterns tend to influence California's weather in some fairly consistent ways once we get deeper into fall and winter. We could see warmer ocean temperatures off the California coast, which in turn tends to support higher overnight low temperatures. Essentially, less nighttime cooling along with more coastal fog as that warmer. Moister marine air interacts with the coastline. Perhaps the most consequential piece of an El Niño setup, though, is the potential for stronger atmospheric river events later in the fall and winter. Atmospheric rivers are those long, narrow plumes of concentrated moisture that can dump enormous amounts of rain and mountain snow on California in a short period. They're responsible for some of the state's biggest flooding events, and also for a huge share of our annual water supply. It's still early to say exactly how active this fall and winter will be, but a developing El Niño is exactly the kind of signal that raises the odds of a more active atmospheric river season down the road. We'll be tracking this one closely as we move deeper into autumn, and I'll keep you updated as the picture becomes clearer. All right, let's pause here and check in with some of you. Asterisk. Anchor glances to a second screen or graphic showing live comments. I'm seeing some great reports coming in already. Looks like we've got someone in the Inland Empire saying they can already see thunderheads building over the mountains to their east. That tracks exactly with what we're expecting for San Bernardino and Riverside counties today. Someone up near Mammoth says it's actually pleasant right now, mid-70 seconds with a breeze, which makes sense given how much cooler it runs up at elevation compared to the valley floor. And someone down in the Coachella Valley says it's still brutally hot with not a cloud in sight, which is a good reminder that this monsoon moisture hasn't fully arrived everywhere at once. It's going to be uneven, county by county, even hour by hour, as these storm cells fire up, move, and dissipate. Keep those comments coming, where you're watching from, what the sky looks like right now, whether you're feeling any of that monsoon humidity yet. It genuinely helps paint a real-time picture of what's happening across a state this large and this geographically varied. Let's put this all together into a clear, day-by-day breakdown so you know exactly what to expect where you live. Asterisk, asterisk, today. Monday, asterisk, asterisk. Heat remains the headline across the Central Valley, the Eastern Sierra, and the deserts, with widespread 90s and low 100s, and Death Valley pushing well past 120. At the same time, monsoon moisture is already streaming in, and we're seeing the first rounds of thunderstorm development over the Sierra Nevada and the Southern California mountains and deserts. This is very much a transition day, hot start, stormy afternoon potential in the higher terrain. Asterisk, asterisk. Tuesday and Wednesday. Asterisk, asterisk. This is where the pattern really kicks into gear. Thunderstorm coverage increases across San Diego's mountains, San Bernardino, Riverside, the full length of the Sierra Nevada, and potentially out toward the Las Vegas area. The approaching upper-level low starts to nudge storm activity toward the coast. So don't be shocked if you see building clouds and even isolated showers or thunderstorms reaching coastal Southern California and the Bay Area during this window. Temperatures continue easing off their weekend peaks, though it will still feel warm, especially away from the immediate coast. Later this week, into next week. Asterisk, asterisk. The cooling trend becomes more pronounced as the overall flow shifts to a southwesterly onshore pattern. That's the pattern that ushers in more typical late summer conditions, less extreme heat, a return of a more standard marine influence along the coast, and a gradual tapering of the most intense thunderstorm activity. Though some monsoon moisture could easily linger into the following week, given how persistent this setup looks. Before we wrap up, let's turn this into an actionable checklist, because a forecast is only useful if it changes what you do. If you're heading into the mountains or the desert over the next few days, the Sierra, the San Bernardinos, San Gabriels, San Jacintos, or out toward Death Valley and the Mojave, check the latest forecast right before you go, not the night before. These storms can develop and shift quickly. Start early in the day if you're doing any high elevation hiking, since afternoon is peak thunderstorm time, and plan to be off exposed ridgelines and summits well before storms typically build. If you're driving through desert regions, watch for flash flood warnings and never attempt to cross a flooded wash or roadway, even if it looks shallow. Water levels and current strength are almost always more dangerous than they appear from a vehicle. If you're along the coast, especially around high tide over the next couple of weeks, be aware that the surf will likely be more powerful than usual thanks to that southern hemisphere swell. That means stronger rip currents, even on calm-looking days. So extra caution is warranted for anyone swimming, wading, or fishing from rocks and jetties. And if you're in a low-lying coastal spot, keep an eye on high tide timing in case of minor nuisance flooding. And if you're in the Central Valley or the deserts, still dealing with triple-digit heat today and tomorrow, don't let your guard down just because relief is on the way in a few days. Stay hydrated, limit strenuous outdoor activity during peak afternoon hours, and check in on elderly neighbors or anyone without reliable air conditioning. It's the big picture for California this week. A genuine monsoon surge bringing increasing thunderstorms, lightning, and flash flood risk to the mountains and deserts. A real chance of storms reaching the coast and even the Bay Area by midweek. A gradual cooling trend chipping away at this weekend's brutal heat. A manageable smoke situation outside the far northeast corner of the state. An active southern hemisphere swell to watch along the coast. And a developing El Nino that's already got us thinking ahead to what fall and winter could bring. I want to thank everyone who's been dropping comments throughout the show. Keep them coming even after we sign off. I'll be checking in on the thread tonight. Let me know where you are, what the sky's doing, and how hot or how stormy it actually feels where you're standing right now. That kind of real-time, on-the-ground reporting from all of you is honestly one of the most valuable tools we have for tracking a pattern this dynamic across a state this size. Stay weather aware over the next few days, especially if you're near the mountains or the deserts. I'm going to be back with updates as this system evolves. Until then, stay safe, stay cool, and stay dry when the thunder rolls in. Good night, California.